Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another Creatives on the Couch session. Creatives is the podcast for creative professionals everywhere. We're part of the Creatives Group, which is a private membership group for creative professionals in all creative industries. It's a safe space for them to come together, connect, learn and develop their creative businesses. So without further ado, let's crack on with our very special guest that we have for you today.
Singer, songwriter, music producer, ARRUN HARKER. Welcome, ARRUN.
Hi, thanks very much for having me.
We've worked with you before, we've met you before, and we've worked with you before. So ARRUN wrote the music for our award-winning short film SCOOTCH, didn't he, Melanie?
He did. And for those of you appalling people who haven't seen SCOOTCH yet, I know you're dying to, because you'll have seen all of my social media posts about the wonderfulness of SCOOTCH and all the thousands and millions of awards that we've won. We're going to just play you the trailer. So listen very carefully, because the music is ARRUN's wonderful work. So if you haven't seen SCOOTCH yet, you don't know what you're missing.
No way.
It's an open goal, Elmer.
Don't care. It's not going to happen.
Almost foolproof, I would say.
That doesn't make it Louis-proof, does it?
Go! Let's go!
Come on, get this, move! It'll never work.
So that was the trailer to SCOOTCH. Now, ARRUN, when I first asked you to do the music for SCOOTCH, you hadn't done music for film before, had you? It was a bit of a challenge. How did you find creating a musical score for a film?
Yeah, it's a good question, because I hadn't actually written for a brief before, so it was quite different in the sense that suddenly you're having to think about things from an audio-visual perspective rather than purely from the audio perspective. So, you know, you gave me a string of different scenes and bits of footage and all the rest of it and said, right, we need music that's going to sync up here. And then you've got to sort of, it's kind of like working within more rules, but those rules can actually force you to sort of be more creative, because you've got to find ways to make sure that everything lines up nicely. You know, there might be a moment where the camera perspex suddenly changes to a different part of the scene or a different point of view of a different character. And, you know, you might want to have some sort of impact sound or like a cymbal crash or a big drum hit or something happen at that exact moment. I think in SCOOTCH, there's a moment where one of the robbers puts up his hands when he's arrested by the police. And that seemed like the perfect moment to put like a sort of trombone sound just sort of pitching down, and it just added to like the comic value of it.
It's brilliant.
At the same time, you've got to kind of be more creative sometimes, which sounds a bit weird if you're sort of working within stricter rules, because if you've created a piece which is a certain beats per minute or a certain time signature, and you know that it kind of lines up quite nicely with some parts of the scene, but then, you know, without some drastic adaptation to that time signature or that speed, it doesn't then line up with another part of the scene, then you've got to sort of think, okay, well, what can I do here to kind of buy back another 3 seconds to allow us to sort of preempt that change in scene? So I think there was a moment in the actual escape scene, the final proper heist, as it were. There's a sort of little passage of music for about 4 seconds where it's kind of just like a break, like a drum break that just sort of plays for a few seconds. And it's literally only there just to kind of buffer, give it a bit of a space, so that when the scene then changes to them running through an alleyway, as they've now successfully escaped, that it actually fits with the visual. Otherwise, the whole thing just didn't work, and then you've got to start again. So
exactly, and it does, and that was a learning curve from me. I mean, again, this is the first film that I had produced and tying it all together so that it seemed completely seamless is quite difficult. You know, the viewing experience, because when you're working in a film and you're so close to the script and you're so close to putting it together, you know, we all know that it makes sense, but actually if you're trying to view it from the perspective of someone who's never seen it before and they're trying to piece things together, and we did have to put in extra shooting days to film some extra scenes to say, actually we need something that joins A to B because it's too big of a jump if you've not seen it before, to make it flow. So we had to insert a few little extra pieces just to make it flow. And then obviously the music had to flow. And as you say, you need fillers, don't you, to transition it from one scene to another. So it's not just one piece of kind of fluid music. It has to transition from one scene to the next, because you can't not have sound.
Yeah, exactly. And literally from what you just said as well, it's always a race against time, because the longer that you're working on your own project, whether that's film, music, whatever, some sort of art, the longer that you're exposed to it and you've listened to it or watched it over and over again, the more sort of confirmation bias gets embedded in your brain that everything is fine and doesn't need changing. But as soon as you then give it to a new person to see or watch or hear, they can probably point out a number of things that either don't make sense or need to be adapted to make sure that there's enough sort of signposting or whatever, which just kind of go past you at some point because you've heard it or watched it so many times that you don't see a problem anymore. So yeah, it can be quite difficult the longer it goes on.
Yeah, it can. And it doesn't help when your director and co-producer suddenly decides she wants to cut 3 seconds off a scene when the music's already been done. Isn't it, Julie?
The producer just cuts a few seconds of a scene and it just doesn't work. Yeah, so it's very fine. It's a lot of fine tuning. You've been talking really about the physical, the mechanical art of putting a music score on a movie, but talk to us about the kind of music that Melody told you she wanted. Tell us about the brief she gave you.
So what I quite enjoyed about it was there was some guidelines. There was some, here's how it should feel. This is the kind of tone. This is you know, what we're trying to achieve with the audience. This is where a laugh should be. But I also had, Melanie gave me quite a lot of creative freedom to kind of interpret that and come up with something that really worked. And I think that's probably part of the reason why a lot of the music worked quite well, because I understood the tone of the kind of the comedy of the film. You know, it's very sort of slapstick humor a lot of the time. So going for something quite cheeky is probably the word that best describes a lot of the score. Worked quite well with the tone that you guys were trying to create with the film.
Yeah,
I mean, how would you describe it? The music that you composed, how would you describe it? What genre would you say it is?
There's a whole range, isn't there? Because the main theme is kind of a bit grungy, but it has sort of it has like a whole brass section behind it as well. But then a lot of the scenes in the film are, there's a lot of brass, because brass just seems to work very well in sort of comedy aspects. Brass just sounds funny in certain contexts. There's some strings. I mean, there's some drum and bass influences in some of it, isn't there? There's some drum and bass breaks in certain parts of it, like the escape with the heist. Yeah, it's very sort of cops and robbers. Quite a cheeky score. Lots of brass bands and stuff like that.
But you did really well, Aaron, because that's kind of what I wanted. It was kind of cheeky but not cheesy. You know, and it missed that, and I was worried about it, because what you have to understand, viewers, Aaron is being tremendously kind to me, because the brief that I gave him was loose, to say the least. In fact, it was one sentence, and I had an idea in my head of what I wanted, and the brief that Aaron got was, it's got to sound like a cross between the Sweeney and 70s porn. That was it. And bearing in mind this young lad is only barely 20, I was met at first with this kind of, what? And I said, just Google it, you'll be fine. So so he did, bless him. But what he came up with was exactly on the money. I mean, I couldn't be more delighted. It was just perfect, absolutely perfect, because it was that kind of saucy sound that I was after, but not erring on the tacky, which I was delighted with, because that's what I wanted.
But you're talking about the main theme of the film. What about the crisp scene in the bar that everybody absolutely loves? That was totally different. Tell us a bit more about that, Aaron.
You mean the so-called strippers and crisps?
Strippers and crisps.
That was actually, other than the main theme, that was probably my favourite song to compose and to listen to. It's kind of like a cabaret jazz style piece of about 2.5, 3 minutes or whatever it is. I mean, for those of you who haven't watched the film, watch it, because that scene alone makes it worthwhile. A strange...
Oh wow! Isn't it?
Yeah, just kind of Barry White. It wouldn't be sort of a bit of a Barry White feel, but you know, a little bit, yeah, cheeky.
There's all sorts going on there in the deranged recesses of that man's mind. But throwing crisps in a sort of dream scenario at some women that he'd probably quite like to get on better terms with, definitely called for a type of music which was somewhat sensual, but at the same time, it couldn't really be that sensual without some comedy.
Friend.
Yeah.
But again, this is where Aaron, from my point of view, you were a delight to work with, because you just got the tone really right. You know, it wasn't like something that was going to creep you out, and it wasn't something like really god awful, tacky, horrible. It just managed to meld somehow into that kind of overload of sensual, cheesy ridiculousness, but it worked. You know, it really worked. So I was just delighted, absolutely delighted with it.
Well, I can also say I was very happy that you decided to keep in my vocal at the very start of that. The very start of that piece, it is actually me saying, "Come on, check it out, baby," and then pitch down.
You.
That's me. Pitch down 1 or 2 octaves or whatever to create the kind of like effect.
Yeah.
So I was quite happy that
Let's play it quickly. Come on, Melanie, let's play it quickly.
Okay, well, now we've talked about it, we have to give you a little sample. So here it is.
Maybe they are. If only I could have all that money. You can have all the crisps.
So there you have it, the pub scene, the famous pub scene from SCOOTCH. The last thing I'm going to talk about for the music creation for SCOOTCH, Aaron, was the jingle for our Grumpy Granny. Again, we have a key character who has a reoccurring appearance throughout the film, and I wanted her to have her own music, and I was inspired a little bit by the Lady Killers. And you know, this little old lady, and she comes on, and you know, every time you see her in the Lady Killers, you know, there's this very gentle sort of tinkle of music. You know, I want this woman to have her own music. Every time she comes into shop, she's got to have her own kind of theme tune. How difficult was that for you to create? Because I think I kept you up at nights a little bit with that, didn't I?
Yeah, that was probably, I think that was the only one that required a kind of complete sort of start again from the initial idea. I probably tried to sort of go too close to that Lady Killers bit of music, and I came up with something that was also quite tinkly, and it was a little bit too kind of lullaby-like, if that's even a word, which it definitely isn't. But in the end, I think we had to just go straight back to the drawing board. It was just not going to work with the visual element. And then the kind of idea of, I think we all jumped on a call with Stephen as well. And then the idea of kind of doing a sort of 3/4 waltz style thing would give it a kind of sort of jauntiness. And that's kind of, again, that kind of gave it the lift and almost like the comedy aspect it needed, which as soon as you then added a trombone on top of it, it's just game over, you just won.
It was brilliant. Again, see, we hope you're piquing your curiosity now. You've got to go watch the film. We'll give you a link to it later. But Aaron, you did an absolutely tremendous job on the film, and all of us that worked on it couldn't be more delighted, and you know, testament to your talents, because we wouldn't be winning the awards that we're winning if it hadn't all come together and worked really well. I'm still stunned to be
I can't believe how many it's won. It's brilliant. It just keeps more and more just keep piling up, don't they?
But it certainly, the music certainly brings the whole thing together, so kudos to you.
Well, hopefully there'll be a Best Music Award at some point.
But since then, you've ditched your job, haven't you? And you're now composing and producing music full time?
Yes, I quit back in October, and I've gone sort of full time now as a starving penniless artist. So
Join the club.
So what was your job before you decided to launch into a creative career?
Yeah, I was working at an AI like tech startup called Luminance. So it was basically artificial intelligence for lawyers, which sounds quite dry, but the actual technology itself was really interesting because it was a sort of industry leader in what it does. It's one of the sort of foremost companies in that area. But I'd been doing it for sort of 3 years. I'd learned a hell of a lot from that job. Like as you do from any job, you learn so much and you build yourself up a lot from it. And I kind of got to a point where I realized that because the hours were pretty horrific sometimes, and it was not uncommon for me to be sort of starting work around 8:30, 9 and finishing work around 9, 10. Then at the time I was living in Hackney, and my flatmate would often just sort of, I think he'd just kind of take pity on me and just make dinner for both of us because he knew that it was going to be another late one. And it would be a case of like, right, so you finish work at 9, 10 o'clock, right, have a bit of dinner. It's now 11 o'clock. Most people are going to bed now. Right, now I need to get a couple of hours in on doing some music or creating something. And it just became it's just a bit unsustainable. It came to a point where I was a bit like, well, that's just distracting me all the time. So I'm 26 now. I've got to sort of make a decision as to whether I'm going to really go for broke on this and take a leap.
Oh, so not 20 years old like Melanie thought.
Yeah, well,
Meant in the best possible way, darling.
A great age, Aaron.
yeah, she's just being kind about how youthful I look, clearly.
Exactly.
So what are you currently working on? Seeing as you're working full time now on your music.
Yeah, so one thing that's going to be sort of coming about, or that I'm going to sort of finalize now in the next couple of days or so, is I've been working on a song called Not a Ride. Basically, it's going to be a song that I'm going to release on something like Just Giving. It's going to be purely for charity. There's going to be no sort of Spotify or YouTube or anything like that in terms of the point of it is to raise money for Ukrainian refugees. So it would sort of defeat the purpose to release it on a streaming platform because it kind of commodifies the release and they start getting all the money. So it's called Not a Ride because it's a quote from President Zelensky, who gave that brilliant repartee to NATO leaders who offered him evacuation. And he said, "I need ammunition, not a ride," which I thought was just such a good line. So that became the title of the song. And it's very different to the couple of singles that I've already put out. It's more of a folk song with some of the other influences that I tend to kind of bring in with kind of sampled drums and that sort of thing. But there's a huge sort of string section to it as well, accompanying it. It was a really difficult song to write because obviously the subject matter is so terse and so relevant and so horrific right now. I sort of said to myself at the start, if what comes out of this process is just very mediocre, then I'm just not going to release it because it's kind of insulting to put out something that's not your best work for something as important as this. In the end, over the last couple of months, I've sort of revisited it, redrafted it, refined it, all the rest of it, and now I'm really happy with it. So I'm going to be putting that out, and it will be on a kind of pay what you want sort of model, so people can donate whatever sort of quantity of money is okay for them, and hopefully make some money for people who really need it. So that's the plan.
We'll put the link on in the body of this video. We'll put that link so people can go in and just click on it if they want to buy it and contribute.
Absolutely, and I think that is a really, really marvelous thing, Aaron. I really do. And I think this is where some of the creative industries really come into their own, creating, because Chris Miller, who owns the SCOOTCH clubs, has done a couple of charity record releases as well, hasn't he? And it's just phenomenal what can be achieved through the arts to make people feel good and do good, and people turn to the arts in times of trouble. They do. That's when you want to hear music. That's when you want to see a really funny film. You want something that's going to just take you away from your troubles a little bit. But I think we've got a little clip here of that new release, Aaron. So we're just going to play it now as a
Goodly.
sample just for our listeners, and then we'll put the links below for where you can download it.
What reporter will got years in the making, and the price of blood's a grain of truth. If we less than one, the bell comes due. West the west from its peaceful topper, and engines humming. Payload comes with many men and many guns.
And that was Not a Ride by the fabulous Arrun Harker, and all proceeds are going to help Ukrainian refugees. So if you would like to download your copy, the link is going across the screen now, as is all of Arrun's social media handles as well. So if you'd like to follow him on Spotify or Instagram or Facebook, keep an eye across the screen, and please do hook up with him there.
So Arrun, what are your top 3 tips for anyone with musical talent who would like to break into the music production world like you have?
That's a very good question. Ooh. I think number 1, learn how to mix vocals. Just with where music is today. Honestly, I've seen this happen. You can have a mix which is actually pretty average in quality, but if the producer has mixed the vocal really well and all of the words are really clear and audible, and you can follow along, and it's not a strain where you're constantly trying to understand what the singer has said, it instantly elevates the quality of the mix. Like by today's standards, it just suddenly gives it a sense of like proness, if you like. It's something that I learned quite late, because I tend to sort of listen to a lot of older records more than I do listen to sort of newer stuff that's come out recently. And like the quality of mixing the different style is very different from like the 1970s, for example. You know, if you listen to like a Pink Floyd record as an example, the amount of volume that you have on a vocal in a track like that is much quieter and much more in the background and much more kind of blended with all the rest of the band than it would be today, where it's just dominating the entire mix. It's easily the loudest thing there. Number 2, buy a set of studio monitors. It's not impossible to mix on headphones, and you can get some good results mixing on headphones and producing on headphones certainly, but you can't simulate what's called crosstalk on headphones. If you've got a situation where literally the left channel and the right channel are independently going into your ears at the same time, then you're missing a lot of information in terms of stereo information, because when you're listening on monitors, like actual speakers in front of you, you're hearing both speakers, but they're hitting your ears at different times, depending on the left or the right. And obviously your head's in the way of one of your ears each time. So it's very hard to kind of make good decisions on where things should be in the stereo field if you're not mixing on some sort of speakers. This is a really difficult question. 3, start promoting yourself early. I wish I'd done that. Sadly, today it is all about marketeering. It's all about promoting yourself, selling yourself, influencers, TikTok, Instagram. Like, there's just no way around it anymore. I spent so long sort of naively hoping that I was just going to be like signed on a whim by someone who just would pick me up and just make it all happen. And I ended up delaying and not putting stuff out for years as a result of that foolish philosophy. And it's just not sustainable. Even now, like major labels, for example, they literally use algorithms to sift through social media profiles and basically flag those that have enough followers for them to take notice of before they even think about opening a discussion. And to be honest, if my sort of previous philosophy had even panned out and someone had miraculously gone, oh wow, yeah, I'm just going to sign you, here's a record deal with Columbia, then frankly the terms of that deal, having no audience yet, would have been so horrific. They probably would have owned my soul for decades and managed to find ways to take most of the royalties anyway, most of the publishing rights anyway. So you want to kind of, I think anyway now, you want it, if you're going to go for that route, you want to come from a position of strength. You want to be able to negotiate from a position of strength. So start promoting yourself as soon as possible, start creating content. It's something that I'm sort of quite new to now, and I'm only just kind of getting to grips with. And it is kind of awkward and it is kind of cringy sometimes, and you just have to kind of do it and swallow it. Like
you have to keep saying to everybody, I'm the greatest, and it can be quite cringeworthy.
Yeah, exactly.
And especially for you, Arrun,
that you've done, you know, giving up your job and believing in yourself so deeply that you would give up a job and say, right, I'm going to go for it. This is now going to be my life.
Yeah, well, it was kind of an all or nothing, really. I was either going to continue kind of meandering through life, sort of relatively comfortable, but not really happy or enjoying myself, or do what I know I've always wanted to do. You know, I've been wanting to do this since I was 5-6 years old. I wrote my first song with my best mate at school. It was called Funky Town, which was suspicious because it had no funk elements to it whatsoever. But, yeah, like I've always wanted to do this. I've always known I always wanted to do this. I did a degree in law, and for a while I was going to go into practice doing that. But even then, I kind of had it sort of slightly on the back burner to an extent, because I was thinking, well, it'll only be a temporary thing, which is kind of why I ended up at Luminance, because it's a legal tech company, so it seemed like a good sort of middle way. But yeah, at some point, if you're gonna go for a career in the arts, then you've got to sort of believe in yourself to an extent and just go for it. Otherwise, you probably never will.
Yeah, you do. You have to have a fairly thick skin as well. And we talked to an actor last time, and he was telling us about dealing with rejection as well, because, you know, one thing that he said is you're going to hear no a lot, and you have to kind of have the toolkit in place to deal with that and keep going. And in today's world of social media, as we know, as small business owners, you do have to get yourself out there, and you do have to put the content, you know, content marketing is just king at the moment. And working with you, Arrun, the one tip that I would probably add on to your magnificent tips there is progress, not perfection. Because working with you, and I know that I frustrated you at times, because Arrun is a true perfectionist, and he likes it to be just so, and it's got to be perfect, it's got to be perfect. But with the timescales and things that we were working to, and because we did cut a bit here and I had to chop bits here and there and nearly give Arrun heart failure. So but you can't do that, because it just stopped. I don't care whether it just stops. The scene stops, and I just got to stop there, and I can't bugger about with it anymore, because it's done. You know, and you know, we're winning awards, so hey, you know what, I was right. But you know, listening to somebody who's a perfectionist, who's had this beautiful creation, you know, it's kind of perfection paralysis sometimes. If you're waiting for something to be that perfect, you're not going to put it out. But if you don't put it out, you're not going to gain the followers, and you're not going to gain, you know, do the stuff that you need to do. So just
but there's a fine line between perfection and being sloppy. You know, you have to find that middle. Because at one stage you were chopping off bars, which Arrun thought was absolutely essential to lead into a scene. You know,
I still chopped off a lot.
You can understand somebody who's a perfectionist, because I'm a perfectionist as well, but also you've got to relax a bit, but not be too sloppy. Just throw it all together and go.
There is a difference. There is a difference. People who really know what they're doing, like Arrun does, you know, again, he could turn out something that he thinks is a bit, but to the normal ear, and this is what sort of I coach people in as well, is, you know, when Arrun's putting stuff out onto social media, for example, the people listening to it aren't music producers. The people who are your fans aren't listening to it with that professional ear. Now, okay, you're hoping that maybe somebody with that professional ear is going to pick you up and sign you, so you're still wanting to do it to the best of your ability. But to build your audience, most of us aren't going to be hearing those really, really subtle things that, you know, you've had to maybe not spend so much time on. And the same with some of the production stuff. It's kind of like if I waited till everything was spot on and perfect, you know, I wouldn't do half the stuff that I do.
Yeah,
you know,
and
and
actually,
you've got to move forwards. You have.
That's actually if I was going to give a fourth tip, which might actually be more important than the other three off the back of that, the tip would be just put music out, just start. Because I waited literally years. Like I put out my first single in 2020. I've been producing since I was like 14. What on earth was I doing for 6 years? And what it was constantly chasing perfectionism. At the same time, it was that perfectionism paralysis, because at the time, for the first few years, I wasn't a good enough producer. I wasn't a good enough mix engineer to sort of reach the level that I wanted the songs to be. And I didn't want to do a disservice or an injustice to those songs. I wanted them to be represented as well as they should be for the amount of craft that I put into them. But that doesn't help. Like I've still got songs that I started 4 or 5 years ago that I spent months and months, or in some cases even over a year, like refining and changing and mixing, remixing, all that kind of stuff. And it just doesn't help. Like you've got to just start putting the content out. And as you put the content out, you learn so much with each release. And if you don't have that vital step, then you end up just delaying your progress, and it's for no real good reason. You've got to kind of keep a handle on like the anxiety of how people are going to receive it. Understand, like you just said, that most people who listen to it aren't going to be thinking, yeah, the snare's a bit quiet in the mix. They're probably they're not going to care. Like there's, to an extent, as you get better, then it almost becomes less of a problem, because as you become quicker and more efficient and you know exactly how to solve a problem as an engineer or whatever, or a producer, then you can start to, I don't want to advocate chasing that perfectionism too much, but you can to an extent chase that perfectionism because you know that you can get it done once you know what you're doing properly.
Yeah.
And that's when you can start to really think about, well, I do want to kind of feather the mix a little bit more there, because even though it's not something that the audience can audibly hear as a difference, it's something that they can feel. And when you start getting to that level of kind of precision, that's when that perfectionism isn't an enemy anymore, I think.
Yes, because you've gone through that learning curve, you know, and that's what I say, everybody has to start somewhere. So don't worry too much that it's not that great. It's your first thing, you know, your first thing. And it's the same with any small business owner out there, you know, and I'm sure anybody listening can relate, you know, small business owners, your first Facebook Live that you ever did, that you look back now and think, oh my God. And then the Facebook Lives that you do now, because you've done so many and you've got it off pat, you know what you're talking, you're very confident, you're taking questions, you're multitasking in it, all those kinds of stuff. It's the same thing. You just need to put that one foot forward and just get started and build your professionalism as you go along, because if you don't start, you know, you've got nothing to build from.
But as Aaron says, practice makes perfect. You're more relaxed now, aren't you, than you were when you were first starting out? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I know now that I can start a song, and if I need to, I can mix it in a couple of days. I can then master it in another day. Well, 30, 40 minutes, whatever it is, to do a mastering session. Back then, it was a case of taking weeks mixing, remixing, changing levels, having a load of knock-on effects because you changed a bunch of levels and then didn't realize that it had a load of other knock-on effects on other parts of the mix that you've now got to rebalance. And you end up just kind of infinitely chasing your tail, and that's just not helpful. Much better to just kind of have, it would be nice if everyone could just have someone that turns up at their door on like a certain deadline day and just takes it away from you. Whatever state it's in, they just confiscate it and tell you that you can't work on it anymore. Maybe someone should invent that.
You need to have a melody constantly in your life.
Exactly. Or just find a crazy lady who's doing a film and just say, right, I need this and I need it by then. You know, write me this song and I need it by the end of the week. Yeah. Right. We are running out of time. So we're going to finish off with our lovely values jam game. So I'm going to shuffle the cards and then I'm going to run my finger along some of the cards, Aaron. And then when you say stop, I will pull a card and we will discuss what is on that card. So if I can make sure. Okay, so I'm just going to go backwards and forwards and you just say stop whenever you want to.
Stop.
Oh, this one here. Right. Oh, this is a really good one. Julie, we're getting all these fantastic cards that are so relevant to each discussion. It's quite insane. The card you picked is creativity.
Right.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know. Isn't it amazing? Gosh. Okay, so
Hasn't
first,
it been finance?
what does creativity mean? What does it look, feel, and sound like to you?
Well, look is difficult. Feel, I think, is finding unorthodox solutions to problems, is one way that I would look at it. I think one of the common themes with a lot of creatives is a lot of creatives, like, we lack common sense. So a really simple, like, practical problem will be presented. And like my brain just doesn't think logically sometimes. It doesn't think about what's the most efficient way to solve this problem. It starts thinking about something completely disconnected and abstract that just doesn't really have a lot of relevance to the problem.
So it looks like a massive tangled ball of string, maybe colourful string.
It's just pure chaos, yeah.
That's excellent. Creativity is chaos. Yeah.
Okay. Where have you noticed a lack of creativity?
Finance.
I don't know. I've done quite some creative accounting in my time.
Creative accounting. There's a fun term. Lovely way of getting around certain rules that's supposed to create a level playing field.
When have you experienced creativity?
Coming up with answers to these questions, probably. Certainly for Scooch. Songwriting is obviously an inherently creative process. Yeah.
I think Scooch is a good example because it did stretch you, and I do apologise. How could you improve more creativity in the world, do you think?
Definitely more help from government to support creative industries. I mean, I know that's a pretty fashionable point right now, particularly with the pandemic, but everything seems now to be completely focused towards economic growth and efficiency, which basically means almost to the extent of all else, promotion of wealth creating activities, which isn't in itself a bad thing. Like, encouraging people to do maths and computer science is a great thing. Like, we need more people who are doing stuff like that. At the same time, it shouldn't come at the expense of people who create literature and poetry and music and film and TV, because without those things, life just isn't really worth living, is it? It's just a very boring, grey, dreary existence. And at the moment, the balance isn't right, because there are far too many creatives who are struggling to pay bills and eat, especially now with the kind of current crisis, cost of living crisis. It's just a deterrent to even try. And I sort of shudder to think how many millions of like amazing creative people who have fantastic ideas to do films or documentaries or albums or whatever it might be, who just never will, because they haven't got enough financial incentive to start. Obviously, it's the same with someone who wants to start a business. I mean, I think all of us here have got our own businesses. So I'm certainly experiencing that now, how difficult it is when you've created a new business and you're trying to get your first set of clients and retain old clients and all that sort of thing. It's very difficult. It's very unpredictable. But ultimately, like, people in creative industries are going to need help, because those industries just are often very, very difficult to get started in, a lot more so than a lot of others.
Well, government sets, when there's a financial crunch of any sort, the first thing governments cut are the arts.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And you're right. It gives us a world that is pretty dismal. It just compounds the crisis, really, when you don't have at least some soothing music to listen to or a nice movie to watch. First thing
in the Great Depression, what got people through the Great Depression? It was the wartime films. Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. They were the ones who lifted the nation. If you cut all of that out, and all we've got is slagging each other off on Twitter, we're going to be damaged as human beings. We really are. We need our literature and our great poems and illustrators and beautiful art and films and music. We need all of that. As human beings, our souls need those things. They're vital to our existence.
Don't forget drinking.
I'm
passionate about it.
Sorry, I didn't hear what you said. What did you say?
I said, don't forget drinking.
Oh.
Making moonshine in a bathtub probably helped a lot of people through the 1920s as well, I'd assume.
Yeah.
Absolutely,
We
absolutely.
wish you well on all your future creative endeavors, Arrun. It looks like you certainly following your dream.
Definitely.
Well
Long way
done.
to go, but it's all about the journey, as they say, as Mel said earlier.
Well, we
Oh,
hope we'll see more of you in the creatives group going forward.
yeah, that would be great. Creatives is a group for creative professionals to do precisely that, to connect with each other, to support each other, and to help each other's businesses grow, because being a creative as well can be quite lonely. It can be quite a lonely process, especially when you have great ideas and you don't necessarily want to share those ideas with people, and you know there's all sorts of things going on. And as I've said before, we've said this on the show, you know, creatives are a certain breed. You know, not everybody gets us, and if you're in a safe environment with other creatives where you want to spout off, or you've got a frustration, or you want to put something like new piece of music out there, look, I've just done this, is it rubbish or is it really good, get the feedback, you know, you can do that in a safe space, and that's what creatives is all about, is helping the creative industries learn, develop and grow and thrive, because we are important, we are needed in this world. So I will put in the links below in the show notes what you need to do if you're interested in becoming a member of Creatives, if you're a professional in the creative industries. I'll also put all the links to Arrun's song, Not a Ride, so you can download that, and all of his social media links as well. And of course, after this, you are going to want to rush out straight away and go and download SCOOTCH. And you can do that by going to https / whatever it is, vimeo.com/on-demand/SCOOTCH. So go watch it now. You'll be thrilled and delighted that you did, and it will give you that much needed lift to start your day, because not only is it a wonderful piece of filming, it's got fantastic music as well.